Shri Mundaraji, Shri Arun Tiwari, Shri E. Rauji, Shri Ms. Mamta Banerjee, Shri Kale, Shri Markan Adhikari, Shri Kailashnath Adhikari, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and honor to be in front of you. One thing, when I agreed to this, to figure out why the topic, why do we need to reform? Is there a need to reform? And what is it that we want? Because reform is a word which is interesting and it can mean anything to everyone. So you may mean reform differently vis-a-vis me. And that is where I think the issue is. And of course there is a need to change, there is a need to reform. But what? Each employee of a bank would have a different perspective. Each employee of the bank will have a different perspective on what is reform. Every manager will have a different perspective. Every lender will have a different perspective. Borrower will have a different perspective. So that is one part. Second question I ask myself is the reform required only in public sector or also in private sector or in foreign banks or all of them? Because sometimes when we say reforms, we mean that it's for public sector. Because private sector is kosher, they are doing extremely well, foreign banks are doing even better. So the reforms are required only in public sector. And so these are the questions which always come to our mind when we look back. And the other part is what are the expectations of the society, of the lawmakers, of the government, of people from the banking. Is banking a business or is banking a social responsibility activity? Because we want bankers to also lend to poor people, we want bankers to lend to agriculture, we want bankers to lend to everyone. We don't know whether that will make money for bank or not. So we have to figure out whether we want to run bank as a business or bank as a social responsibility activity. And accordingly, then all these things can be done because we are trying to mix up too many things. If a private sector bank is running as a business and a public sector bank is running as a non-business, so-called non-business, then we are expecting different things from different people. And having said that, if banking is a business, then what all they need to, that were required 20 years back or 30 years back or 50 years back, what is happening to people and how do you continue to update all those people? That is also similarly technology. Do we require to upgrade or reform technology of all these banking systems? The fintech companies are coming. What is going to happen to banking? Are they going to take away some businesses? Distribution. Are they supposed to reform that distribution platform now that the brick and mortar may not be required, but probably this business correspondence may be required, that technology allows us to do this. Do also borrowers need to reform themselves or only the banks need to reform? Do lenders need to reform? That is, depositors need to reform. And so for me, there are several questions which come to one's mind. And the other part, because I think again, Madam Binani talked about the issue relating to people going to jail, the decision makers. We are all taught the green notes and blue notes and how to tag and all. Process became more important than the results. So you ended up basically completing all the process and end up giving the loan to bad people probably. And for me, if we can differentiate, because how do you, what is a banker's job? Actually, not the borrowing side, but the lending side. What is a banker's job? He is predicting the future of a business. How is he predicting? Because he has been trained, he has been experienced, he has sort of gone through the motions of life. And then he is predicting that the loan I am giving is going to come back with interest. And that is a very, very huge ask to be given to anyone, including the committees and so on and so forth. Because prediction of future is a very difficult task. And then on top of that, if the loan doesn't come back, the manager or the decision maker or decision makers together have to now start sort of answering questions. And that is where I think procedural part has actually taken over because then you have gone through the process, I have done exactly everything that is required. And if you just gone to the bad guy or a good guy, that is done, right? So that's basically the framework. And for me, given all these issues, how do the banking system across the world work? It's not that only India has banking system. In America there is banking, there is China there is banking, Brazil there is banking. What is happening to those banking systems? And what is basically the issue? I mean, I was in Malaysia getting some award a couple of years back, and Mahathir Mohamad, ex-Prime Minister of Malaysia, was caving on an Asian Banking Award. He was caving on bankers, saying, basically, you have done nothing, you are all cheaters. It basically his framework was that because somewhere on the line, countries are feeling that way, even US after 2008, literally the worst profession to be was in banking. There is a huge backlash because of the conflict of interest, that the bankers are running other people's money. And anytime people lose money or bank lose money, people think the bankers have lost their money. When they make money, it is the brilliance of the people who are putting in money. But when they lose money, it is the banker's fault. And that is where basically banking has become much more fraught with danger or risk in terms of reputation, also individual's reputation, internationally. And just to give you a perspective, how big India's problem is. Somewhere all these reforms and all comes out of the NPAs. Whenever NPAs increase or at least increase publicly, then we come out with this framework of reforms and all. So what is India's problem? By any stretch of imagination, it's not more than $100 billion. I mean, if you multiply it twice, and do whatever multiplication, still India's problem is less than $100 billion on an economy size of $2.5 trillion today. Compared to that, I think Madam Binani also mentioned China, but if you look at, our total size, Indian economy is $2.5 trillion. Indian banking system is close to $1.3 trillion. It's half the size of the economy. In China, on a $10 trillion economy, or $11 trillion economy, the banking system size is close to $36 trillion. And given the constraints they are in, probably 40-50% of that could turn into NPA. That will be at least $15 trillion, $15 to $80 trillion. I mean, estimates may vary from 5 to 15, but there are people who have been saying that most of the Chinese banking is basically a bubble. Now compared to 15 trillion vis-a-vis 100 billion, we are in a much safer position. And it's a hugely resolvable problem if we put our mind to it. The banking has done wonders for India. It is now reaching out much more than what it did even 3 years back. It is reaching out to people. But that is on basically transaction processing and also collecting the deposits. On lending side, it's going to be always an issue. Then where to lend? And how do you create a framework? Basically, whatever we are looking at now is basically past. We are trying to drive our car based on our past experiences. It's basically rear view mirror driving, as I call it. We are not looking at the future. What is happening in future? We need to anticipate, and the banking system will be better off if we are able to anticipate what is coming, how fintech is going to happen, what are the businesses internationally. It's very difficult now to find projects which are actually worth lending to. 30% of world GDP is now into negative interest rate territory. That is, if you put in deposit after 10 years, you will get less money because there is nothing to lend to. The newer businesses don't require too much money. They require, like Google, they might have put in $100,000 and now they are probably 500 billion market capitalization. They didn't require money. Even Infosys never borrowed, or TCS never borrowed, because those are new businesses. They didn't require, they are not capital sort of better with Bankruptcy Act and so on and so forth coming, because I recall the BIFR. I mean, my first brush with banking was the BIFR. And if the banker cannot recover his money under whatever context, pretext, social, then why are you doing banking? Fortunately, this government understood this issue, and at the same time, I still need to sort of look forward and see how the courts will take it up. Because again, if it takes 5, 10, 20 years when things go to court against the bankruptcy courts and so on and so forth, and they get stuck, again, the entire purpose of allowing banking to run as a business goes away, right? So for me, we have as a society a lot of expectations from banking. We as a society also need to reform along with the banking reforms, and I hope I gave you a perspective of, and outsider and also who used to be once an insider, who thinks about PSU banks and how the sort of private sector banks and from these foreign banks. So thank you very much for giving this opportunity.